And you're listening to Tech.radio, a source of news and commentary about technology and science. You can hear us each week with the podcast at Tech.radio, or if you live in mid-Missouri on KOPN Columbia 89.5 FM, Mondays at 6. This week we have Brad.
Hey, everybody.
And more critically, and the folks that are on the radio or on the audio podcast can't see this, we have Brad in a very virtual sense here today because we're both in Mozilla Hubs. We're trying out an experiment. We are we're we're in the same room in the virtual sense of the word. It's think of it like a VR world where I've got an avatar, he's got an avatar. It's like we're playing Minecraft together. But and there's some interesting things about the Mozilla Hubs product. Um,
Well, before
the
you
biggest
jump
one
into
being,
that, let's,
yeah,
I mean, we're now, what is this? We're almost a year into this COVID thing, and,
yeah,
Zoom and Jitsi and, these virtual meetings have become just a fact of life. We're all like living this. Some of us, most of our day is spent in online environments, collaborating with other people, and
yeah.
it's a new thing, and it's a in some ways a very hard thing. I have a lot of sympathy for teachers and that are trying to teach kids in an environment that they were never trained to use, and is not ideal for teaching, but that's what you've got.
Right.
So this Mozilla Hubs thing is it's a little bit like, I don't know. I mean, I've been playing with it this week, and it's a little bit like Zoom in that you kind of have a meeting with people, but it's also different in that your spatial relations are different, and I don't know what would you make of it as far as why is this different than Zoom?
The biggest difference is that you have a sense of location. You've got it's And I have less experience with this and more experience with Sokoko, which is a similar idea. Although Sokoko is 2D. So think of we're in a 3D space right now, virtual. Sokoko is a 2D space, virtual, but it's the same idea because you got an icon. But the thing is, I can if I'm at work, I get a sense of presence of what I'm doing, what everyone else is doing. Where that's all missed with Zoom. With Zoom, there's a person who's speaking at any one moment and everyone's paying attention. So it's simulating a very intense lecture, but there's no
Right.
sense of the audience around you. Yeah, they may have their own little windows showing their video, but it a lot gets lost because there's no context of place. And so like when I'm at work, at one of the places I do work at, they use the Sokoko, and I can see that, oh, Joe and Larry are over in that room over there, but I can see because their icons are flashing whenever you talk. Oh, but they're talking with each other, so I'll go bother them later.
Uh-huh.
That's the kind of context you just flat out can't get with Zoom. And
Right, right.
I see it with my kids when they're into Zoom with the teachers. They put a picture up. For as far as the teacher's concerned, they're probably sleeping, half of them,
Right.
because they don't know, and you don't have time to be prodding each person with a question in the hope that you can learn that information. It'd be too literally half of your class will be gone just trying to ask questions where people are trying to get their mic to work again, and it's a mess. And you don't know what your students are doing, and frankly, the students don't know what the teacher's doing. You get so much lost with
Well,
that.
and the other thing that I find being in a Zoom environment is that a lot of my concentration is taken up either looking at the other person and then worrying that I'm looking off camera, or looking at myself and being distracted about, do I look the way that I should? And
Yeah.
you don't have that's not a very natural um, way to interact with people. In the real world, you can
Mhm.
fidget, you can move around, you can change where you're looking, and it's natural.
Right.
At least in hubs, you can do a little bit of that. And I don't know if you've played with this environment with other people in it, but as you move around, especially if you're wearing headphones, the sound gets localized based on where the avatars are. So if your avatar is
Right.
to my left, I'm when I hear you, you're in my left ear. And if you move around behind me, I can hear you behind me and coming out the other side. So it's that I mean, our brains are evolved for spatial location with sound,
Right.
and you don't get that in a Zoom environment. It's all flat. At least here you get a sense
Yeah.
of. I like the way you put it. It's a sense of location.
Yeah. And even stuff like gestures is done better in a virtual environment, even though it's less real because it's not video. But not gestures, but I mean a focus of attention. I've been doing because I've long before the COVID thing came around. I've been doing remote programming for what 4 years now. I don't know
Yeah, at
how
least, yeah.
long. Um, and even today, even as much experience as I have with video calls because of that, when I start talking to the group, most of the people suddenly stare off in the distance and stop paying attention to me, which is
Hmm.
actually not what's happening. What they're doing is they're looking at the screen right at me, but that's not where the camera is.
Right.
They're not staring at the camera because the camera has no video in front of it. So
Right.
there's no they're not using a teleprompter technology or anything where the my face is overlaid from the source of the sound and the where the camera is. It just doesn't work that way. And so literally it looks like as soon as I talk, everyone ignores me, which is like the least desirable thing to see in your audience.
You're
But
getting
it's what
exactly the
happens.
wrong feedback. You're getting
Right,
the system is telling you they're not paying attention, but they're actually paying attention.
right. And actually if on the off chance any of the Mozilla uh, Hubs team are in here, I recommend they add doors into their
Mm,
simulations next because we use them all the time at work with the Sococo. Because if a friend of mine and I or a colleague and I are actually in the middle of something really intense, we'll close our door and
right.
they can't jump into our room and start talking to us. So they're silent and off off away. um, we'll close our door, and the only way they can get in is the knock on our door, and it literally goes knock, 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 and we have to go and go, okay, yeah, you can come in, or it's an interruption. It's a purposeful interruption. Again, it's a social cue that gets lost with video conferencing systems. But if you don't have the door open, then we fully expect people just to jump into our room. Again, but it also means that there's also that social stigma is like you're thinking yourself, do I just jump in? Those two people are working right now together. Should I just jump in there or should I be knocking first? But you can knock
Right.
on a
Yeah.
room door that's open as well. And it seems like a trivial thing, but it creates social framework around what you're doing.
Hmm.
But yeah, I like this about the hubs is that like my face is facing towards you right now,
Right.
roughly, or not straight at you because that's actually disconcerting as well.
But less so
But
in a sort of cartoony environment like this. And I don't mean if any of
right.
our listeners are old time game players, Hubs has a feel a lot like the old Second Life. You remember that game?
I do. I do. They had
It was
grand
a
conditions for that one too.
it was, but that was there was no game to it. It was probably well ahead of its time. It was meant to be an environment like this where you could collaborate and interact with people, and they even had their own currency, the Linden dollar, and so you could
Mhm.
buy digital things and dress up your avatar. I mean, had Second Life come out in the middle of COVID, it would have probably done really well. It was
Yes,
just 10 years,
and
15 years ahead of its time.
it was too early. In fact, had they came out at the right time later, they could have also done cryptocurrency Linden dollars,
Right.
which
Yeah.
would have actually had real world value of a sense.
I think we're going to get back to, it went, the games tend to lead everything. And I before we were recording the show, your son was on here, and he just dropped in and very naturally, found all the controls, was moving around, effortlessly. It took me an hour or so to get remotely comfortable. So the gamers have gotten prepared for what's coming. I think some of us old timers are going to have a little bit of a learning curve.
It's always easier for the kids.
Yeah.
To them, it's second nature. Yeah. In fact, I don't like to think of my kids had a bit of a learning struggle when they started using laptops and desktop computers in their really young ages because they actually grew up on iPads and Android tablets and stuff. And so they would put their fingers on the screen trying to move things around. But whereas for me, the touch screen is very non-intuitive. I mean, it's not too bad, but it's yeah, yeah. In fact, let's go ahead and you want to go ahead and jump into our first story about this?
Sure. I'm gonna grab this document off of our screen here and put up this. Can't see this if you're not on. This is going to be on. Are we going to put this feed on YouTube someplace?
Yeah, we'll put this up on YouTube. It'll
If you
be
want
the
to
exact
see
same
how this.
audio, but yeah,
Yep. But you'll be able to see it
you'll
from the
you,
camera's point of view.
for those that are not doing it on YouTube, though, our heads, our virtual heads, are now facing towards the screen.
And we've got a story up here that's from National Geographic, a little bit of an older story, but this is all about how Zoom fatigue is taxing the brain, and here's why that happens. Now, did you get a chance to actually dig into this story and read it?
I have not, although I know from firsthand what they're talking about, Zoom fatigue. Um,
Explain.
well, because one of my contract jobs right now is that's pair programming, and so it's not uncommon for me to spend 8 hours in a video call. And now I shouldn't say video call in the sense that the camera's not on the whole time, but I am talking with and working with somebody for 8 hours in a row.
Uh huh.
And yeah, I'm either screen sharing or my camera's on. And so I'm it almost when I'm on Zoom and I'm actively involved in a smaller group, and that's the key is a smaller group. So I'm actually involved in the call. Um, I feel like I'm on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And after 8 hours, I'm I'm exhausted in a way that I never felt when I was in like working inside buildings, doing the same thing, working with groups of people all day long. It was
Yeah.
I'm tired after a while, and I've been doing it now because now all of my jobs are remote because of COVID-19. Now, like I said, I was doing a lot of contract work before, but a lot of that contract work, I would meet up with people and then I would go off on my own for a couple days.
Mm-hmm.
Then come back with the work. And then so it was more of a contract arrangement. So I was on my own a lot, which has its own pros and cons. But I didn't have Zoom fatigue because really wasn't on video conferencing that much.
Mm-hmm.
Now it wasn't Zoom specifically. Like one of the job I was talking about earlier, one of my current ones, it's Sococo, but also I do a lot of WebEx and I do a lot of Google meetings, and there's a lot of different video conferencing solutions out there that, pardon me, do just about the same thing. My avatar should learn how to cough, so I cough at the same time. So that's off topic.
Yeah, there's a social cue in that. You know, you start coughing and I move away.
That's it. They've got
Our
they've got work to
avatars
do.
really should have masks. Yep.
They should. They should. They should come on automatically when we're within 6 feet of each other, just to make us comfortable.
You know, and I think that's the some of the fatigue stuff is it's that what we were talking about earlier, that very intense, continuous, uh, locked focus, death stare that you get on Zoom. Um, I was in a Hubs environment with another developer the other day, and we ended up um, both staying in here for several hours, and not talking most of the time. He was over on the other side, and there was a neat cue that if your avatar, if you're doing something else on your computer where the Hubs browser panel isn't active, if I go to my file browser to open something, the avatar looks up into the sky like you're thinking about something. So you get a little
Oh,
social cue that the other
yeah.
person isn't, they're in the room, their audio's on, but they're not, they're thinking. From the perspective of Hubs, they're doing something else, so they're thinking. And so we kind of just hung out in this room for a couple of hours working on different things. And if I needed to talk to him, I could just turn on the mic and talk to him. In some
Yeah.
ways, it was much more natural environment than what you certainly. Is, when I'm on Zoom, I always like, when can I end it? When can I leave this and get out?
Yes. Well, when can I turn this off and stop? Yeah. Now, I should say that the key is small groups when you're actively involved. If it's a large group, like it's one person addressing an audience, well, that's like watching video.
Yeah.
I'll turn my mic off, take my headphones off, put it on the speakers, sit back and relax and eat some peanut butter or something. It's like watching a show at that point. That's not stressful, but everything else is, yeah. I wonder if I probably enjoy doing a conference in this setup. I'd like to try that sometime because Zoom doesn't work well for conferences. I mean, you can get these, you have speakers at most conferences where they talk about a subject or something like that, and you can get that. But they could have just recorded that for YouTube, and I could have just watched that later. You have no
Yep.
feel of the audience. I can't talk to my neighbor who happens to work in the industry also and get lots of information out of them. That's what I loved about trade shows. Is I oftentimes over half of what I gained from a trade show had nothing to do with the actual program. It was the fact that I was in the same building with that many other people in my industry, and I would go get a coffee, or when we're at lunch, or we're just sitting around in the hallways between sessions, I just start chatting with people. And
Hmm.
for those for those that know me, they go, "Really, you don't sound like you, John," because I'm not actually that social under most circumstances. But when I go to a trade show, though, I am because I know everyone around me is a geek in the same pot.
Right.
So
Yep.
as long as they're not a salesperson. Oh man, salesperson get old. But an actual other person in the show who has something other than getting a commission in mind, that actually cares about what they're doing and the industry and that kind of stuff. Boy, it's just a different group, and it's just a lot of fun to talk to them, and I learn a lot because they'll talk about stuff just offhandedly about stuff that it's not maybe that vendor's not even at the show, but they'll just mention a vendor and I'll go, yeah, that sounds interesting. I'll make a note of it and I'll go later on look at it, and maybe it'll turn into something and maybe it won't. But you just learn so much.
You do, and you also end up crossing paths with um, people that you wouldn't connect with otherwise. That you end up
Yeah,
finding where there's a shared interest or overlap that you just wouldn't find
yeah.
in any other way.
Yeah. So if you had a podium in a virtual world like Mozilla Hubs, and there was a speaker that was going to start talking at 4 p.m. and last for 45 minutes, but you're between sessions. Well, you're still in the hub thing, and you got to walk. You're forced to walk from one area of the building to another area of the building because presumably with hubs it always puts you in the same entry point when you exit and enter.
Yeah,
And so,
it's called a spawn point, and the one of the neat things about this Hubs environment is there's a whole builder. You can build your whole world online. Again, Hubs, we didn't install any software to run this. This is running 100% in the browser. And
yeah,
the environment for creating the room or the environment is also entirely in the browser. Now, you can use tools like FreeCAD or Blender to design buildings and objects and then bring those objects in. But the kind of the world building tool is all browser based and relatively easy to use. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but it's not too bad.
for those that are not familiar with it, this isn't meant to be a PR piece for Mozilla Hubs. We're just, among other things, experimenting with stuff. But with it's an open source product, and so Mozilla, they're the makers of Firefox, which is also open source. They're like a nonprofit, but there are in fact also commercial outfits that are producing online VR setups very similar to this. Because I was looking into that before the show started.
Hmm.
And of course, you'd have to pay for those because they're aimed at the corporate world.
So
And
the one you
but no,
mentioned before that's a commercial product.
It is. For small groups, they'll give you free accounts so you can be in a small room. But if you want like a whole office building with literally bathrooms and break rooms and a lunchroom and like, you know, 50 offices and the ability to handle that many people at the same time in your company, and they have support floors. That company I was talking about actually has, I think, 3 floors in their building.
Hmm.
But you can't see, you only can see the people on your own floor, which
Okay.
makes sense. You think, wait, that's a restriction. You could get around that with VR. Yeah, you could, but don't. Because the whole
Right.
idea is you're working with your local group, and your local team may be even smaller than the local group. So there may be, 20 teams in the same group, and it gives you a sense of order and direction of placement of things, so you can see what's going on.
Hmm.
It's fairly useful. I can see the VR direction this is going with, taking it to the next level.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the I would love to play with this with a real VR, like an Oculus Rift VR setup, where if you have one of those, your avatar then has hands, and you can use your
Hmm.
hands to manipulate things that are in this virtual world. So I think it would be,
Yeah.
I could see, a year or two from now, that might be the killer Christmas present is an Oculus Rift.
Oh yeah, yeah. You're saying KOPN's not going to come up with Oculus sets for us?
Really, they're not. I think they need to. We're out here on the cutting edge exploring this technology. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, I'll let you know how that goes. I have a friend who has an Oculus set. I may have to borrow it from him or go over to his house for a little bit and try this out. Yeah, so far I've not seen a killer use of VR, but the more I've been playing with this, the more I could see this being the killer use of it.
there's a few
This
things that I would really
contextualization.
like to try out more, and that is like because of the way this localizes sound. I'd
Hmm.
like to get about 10 people in a big room like this, because if you move off to the side with one person, you should be able to have, unlike Zoom, only one person can really talk at a time, or it becomes noise. In this environment, you should be able to have any number of side conversations, and it will
Yeah,
make sure that you're only hearing the person close to you.
yeah, that changes the dynamics quite a bit too. Because I mean, because you and I have been playing with it. When you walk away, you get dimmer in sound, which
Hmm.
is also adds some dynamics. So, like, if you're like saying something funny and you get loud on purpose, so the people next to you can hear it a little bit, or something like that. I mean, yeah, the dynamic. Or if you want to reach someone across the room, you have to yell.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure how you do that. Must be a yell button in here someplace.
Yeah, you gotta learn the controls. Yeah. I'd love to also see sound echo, so that if you had
Hmm.
a large enough building and it's starting to fill up, it gives you a sense of group without actually hearing individual voices like you get in the real
Oh
world
yeah,
environment.
yeah,
Restaurants
yeah, yeah,
go way out of their way to build that effect.
yeah. You want a little
Um,
bit of ambient sound there.
yep. You don't actually want to hear the conversations next to you, but you do want to hear that there are conversations going all
Uh huh.
around you. And yeah, it makes for a big difference in the feel of the place and the experience of the restaurant. And in this case, the experience of the conference or whatever it
Yep.
is you're doing here. Now, would this work well for the kids? I think they'd have to battle test it pretty hard because I could see kids really taking advantage of this technology to play all kinds of games with their teacher,
Well, they
which
took
their
advantage
teacher,
of Zoom too. I mean, we had
they did.
Zoom bombing. That was a thing last May, June.
Yep.
So,
Well,
and we're going to have to evolve,
and I've had
social
my own
norms.
kids. My own kids have figured out how to play video. Like they'll take a short video clip of themselves listening to the teacher and then have it repeat and feed
Okay.
into the Zoom somehow. I don't know how they do it, frankly. I haven't had time to grill them about what iOS technology they took advantage of to pull that off. But the teachers are now onto it.
Oh,
But
I'm sure. Yeah. And I'm sure
but
this will, or environments like this will provide all sorts of opportunities for shenanigans. That
yep.
I kind of look forward to that.
Lessons learned as you make the technology work a little bit better. Yeah,
So,
I was. You're
just
good.
from what you've seen so far, can you anticipate what's going to be the real friction or the real problems with environments like this?
I think if it's an open venue, it's probably going to get better and more. Yeah, people are gonna have to deal with the learning curve, so you gotta deal with folks that can hardly use a computer at all now, trying to figure out how to get around in VR, which is not intuitive, and it
Hmm.
very hard to make intuitive. Although it is probably a little bit better if you've got a headset on, you're actually in the VR rig. Um,
So when
is
you first
there's the
joined
nausea
in,
issue, but there's also a security issue. I mean, what if it's a closed conference? How do you make a room private?
you can
Really
do that.
private?
You can do that, but it's well, it'd be like a Zoom link that isn't published, and somebody gets the link, they're going to be in. Um, one thing that when you first joined here, your avatar was like a little fox with goggles, and then you
Yeah.
changed to a. I wonder if there's going to be sort of a social pressure of now it's about how you look and how you dress, because you're going out, right? You is there going to be a have and have not sort of thing? You know, oh, he's got an Oculus. Oh, he's got an even better VR rig. Is
Yeah.
how I look and what I have to interact with this become a social status thing?
And what happens when people start rigging up AIs to make them
Hmm.
more social or better speakers, or so you start adding fakery into the
Right.
already fake environment.
Yep.
And yeah, I was watching a YouTube. There's a set of science fiction videos that come out under the Dust label on YouTube, and one of them had to do with people in the dating scene having the little inner ear AIs telling them what to say next and what to do next. To the point that
Uh,
when they were doing online communication, a lot of folks just set the AI to do all the talking. They disconnect and go do something else. But if you build up a relationship with somebody, is that really your relationship anymore?
right.
And,
Got to go
and
back and read the logs to find out what you said.
yeah, and if they fall in love with you, it's not really you, was it? But they were
Hmm.
actually using it in the real world too, with like inner ear talking things, and so you'd have people on dates where both parties weren't saying what they were thinking; they were saying what they were told to say, and
Well,
that's
I think
just
that's been the truth in dating for a very long time.
yeah. But people weren't very good at lying in the old days.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Well,
Well,
I should say, not everyone was good at lying in the old days.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, all kinds of interesting directions life is going to go in the future, especially with this kind of stuff. If we're going to be doing VR stuff more, I mean, not VR stuff, more remote work, and I think that is the trend for a lot of this stuff. Yeah, we're going to have something like this to make it more livable on a day by day basis. And
And I don't think
Zoom,
that
I'm not
like any.
complaining about Zoom, by the way. Zoom was fantastic in the context that when we needed it.
Yep. And I don't think this replaces it. I don't think. Well, it's like anything. I mean, we still have newspapers and we still have television. It's
Yeah.
the new technologies don't replace the old ones; they just augment. And so I think there's going to be places and times for this kind of a VR environment, but we're still going to use Zoom and Zoom like things for a long time.
Oh, cool. Well, this was fun to talk about. I think we're running out of time here.
All right.
Uh, we really didn't have, yeah, we're pretty much a story on just one theme today, but that's fine. This was a lot of fun to do. And we are up on YouTube already. Just search for tech.radio. And we'll get this video up roughly the same time that the show airs, Monday at 6 on the, so you can, you can
Sounds good.
watch this if you want to. I mean, it's not particularly exciting video. It's going to be two floating heads talking in front of a screen. Those were the stories today. Thanks for listening. And as always, take care.